That night when I finally decided to divorce Damian Lancaster, everything unfolded with a strange calm. There were no screaming matches, no furious accusations, no venomous words flung like knives. There was only one simple truth. One moment he had left me sitting alone in a movie theater, and the next his name appeared in the alumni chat group. They say Selene Montgomery just returned to the States. Wonder how many men will abandon their wives for her this time. Don't worry though, Damian has already gone to pick her up. Attached was a photo. My husband in a long black overcoat that swept to his knees stood with a bouquet of white lilies in his hand. His arms were wrapped tightly around the woman who had always been his unreachable first love. If you looked closely, you could see the redness at the corners of his eyes, the emotion he never showed me revealed openly for her. That night, while I sat through a movie alone, Damian did not return home until well past midnight. He did not explain. Before he left, he simply slipped out before the previews began. Using the same tired excuse every unfaithful man knows by heart, I was not blind. For 4 endless hours, photos poured into my phone from an unknown number. Every moment of them together, every place they visited, I knew as if I had been following in their shadow. So when Damian finally returned, his face drawn with fatigue, his voice soft as he attempted an explanation, I simply patted his hand gently and said, "It's all right." The surprise in his eyes was almost comical. He had expected me to cry, to rage, to sulk, and demand he make it up to me with empty gestures. He had even prepared his usual speech, the one where he scolded me for not being understanding enough, for making too much out of nothing. But this time, none of that was necessary. I drew a deep breath, forcing down the ache clawing at my chest, then looked straight into his eyes and spoke with calm certainty. "Go wash your face, Damian. I have something to say." The bathroom light flicked on a soft yellow glow. Moments later, a crash echoed from inside. When he emerged, his hand clenched tightly around his phone, his expression as cold and composed as always. He raised the phone toward me, his voice steady, detached. "You're upset about this. I didn't tell you because I didn't want another pointless argument. Every time Selene comes up, you lose control, you make a scene, just like now. But this time, there was no anger in me." I tapped the sofa cushion beside me, signaling him to sit. Then, without a tremor in my hands, I pulled a folder from beneath the coffee table and laid it before him. My voice was calm, almost tender. "Don't worry, Damian. From now on, I will never be the kind of woman you despise. Let's get a divorce." When I told Ivy Collins, my best friend since college, she stared at me with disbelief. "You divorce Damian?" I don't believe it. I couldn't fault her. She had witnessed the obsessive way I had chased him for years, seen the endless arguments between us whenever Selene's name entered the picture. She had picked me up from bars when I was too drunk to stand, only to hear me mumble, "Call Damian. Tell him to come get me." So when she asked again if I was serious, I met her eyes and said yes. "It will hurt, but I won't regret it." She was quiet for a long while, then slid a slip of paper across the table. "These days you need an appointment to even file for divorce. This is the number of someone who can get you the fastest slot. They just opened a service for it." I took the note, thanked her with all the sincerity I had left, and she studied me with a frown of worry. "What will you do next?" she asked softly. I had no answer. Because she was right. Divorce is never easy, especially when one side refuses to cooperate. Damian made it clear he had no intention of letting go. That very night, after I laid it all before him, he simply packed a few clothes and left, choosing to sleep at his office. Before he walked out, he gave me that weary sigh, that same condescending tone. "Aurora, you're using divorce as some childish threat just because of Selene. It's immature. You need to grow up." His words, so dismissive, so heavy with contempt, still echoed in my chest, long after the door closed. It was childish. It was irresponsible. That was the man I had married telling me with that tired, superior sigh that I was too grown to be playing such childish games, dismissing my pain as if it were a tantrum. How absurd, how insulting. In a marriage that should have been built on care and compromise, he expected me to carry myself like a stranger, strong and self-reliant, while he flew halfway across the world once a month to check on Selene Montgomery, a woman only 3 years older than me, as though she could not possibly manage her own life. If I hadn't stumbled upon the truth, he would have hidden it from me forever. That night, I thought I would cry myself into exhaustion, but instead, I fell into the blackest sleep I had ever known. In that darkness, I dreamed, and in the dream, I was 18 again, meeting Damian Lancaster for the very first time. College entrance exams had just ended, and my parents were eager to parade me like some rare jewel polished for the highest bidder. I had resisted, but resistance was useless. Eventually, I surrendered, but that didn't mean I could endure the suffocating charade of 3 society banquets in a single day. I felt less like a daughter than an escort for hire passed from one table to another, one bed of expectations to the next. So that night, while my parents mingled with their kind, I slipped away. In the bathroom, I peeled off the suffocating cocktail dress and changed into a plain white t-shirt and light denim jeans. Quiet as a thief, I followed the back path out of the estate, running from the glittering prison. In my mind, I was a defiant Barbie princess, staging her grand escape, imagining that at the end of that narrow road lay freedom and hope. But July nights were merciless, and 20 minutes later, I nearly collapsed breathless and lightheaded. That was when Damian's car pulled up. The tinted window slid down, and his face appeared in the glow of street lamps. My heart stumbled. In our world of privilege, we were both names people whispered about. In that moment, I felt the spark of recognition, as though we were 2 passengers trapped on the same sinking ship. Yet while I was infamous for being too extravagant, Damian was celebrated for his steadfast devotion to a girl from a modest background. That night, 2 lonely heirs did something reckless. We bought cheap liquor, sat on the curb, and talked until dawn. Someone captured that moment in a blurry photo, and by the next morning it was plastered across forums, igniting rumors and speculation. Somehow, almost without meaning to, we were engaged. It was a deal that worked for both of us. I shielded him from the scrutiny of his secret trysts with Selene, and he gave me protection from the suffocating moral expectations of my family. In that fragile arrangement, I found something precious: space to breathe, and a chance to return to the passion I had always loved: photography. For a time, the 3 of us lived in a strange, precarious harmony. When did I begin to love him for real? Perhaps it was the day Selene left for Europe. I never learned how Damian's mother discovered the truth about the 3 of us, nor what she whispered to Selene. But eventually, Selene married someone else. In that hollow season, Damian drifted like a man lost, yet even then he cared for me in small, steady ways. The day my parents tried to force me into donating a kidney to a wealthy businessman in Harbor City, it was Damian who stood in front of me, who told them no, who shielded me for the first time. That night, I looked into his eyes and said softly, "Damian, maybe we should try dating for real." He laughed bitterly. "You want to chase me, Aurora?" I nodded. From then on, I was his shadow. I seized every chance to linger near him, bringing him breakfast, waiting for him after work, following him into his orbit with the stubborn devotion of a girl who refused to surrender. I wrote him love letters. I stood at the foot of Everest and shouted my love to the sky, imagining he might hear it echo across continents. Never once did I think of letting go, not until our first wedding anniversary. That day I found the truth in a chapel abroad. There Damian and Selene had stood before God and exchanged rings, taking vows meant for a lifetime. His excuse was pitiful, insulting. I was only helping her. Selene's husband was too busy to attend, and the church had already been reserved. What was I supposed to do? Waste it? I could still hear the hollow ring of those words. The casual way he diminished what for me was everything. There was nothing left between us. If there truly had been, why had Selene Montgomery's second marriage not been to him deep down? I wanted to believe Damian had let her go, and I did believe him that day, when I looked into his eyes and said quietly, "I trust the words you told me on our wedding day that you loved me." So I gave him 3 chances. 3 chances to prove that vow was real. After the 3rd, I swore that whether he wanted it or not, there would be nothing left between us. And this was the 3rd. The alumni group chat lit up the moment Selene returned. Everyone buzzed with excitement, planning a reunion dinner. I decided to attend, not because I longed for old friends, but because I needed to corner Damian Lancaster once and for all. It had been 7 days since I told him I wanted a divorce. 7 days of silence. I had sent the papers to his office, no reply. I had called his assistant only to be told again and again that he was away on business or locked in endless meetings. No man was that busy. Damian was simply using his favorite weapon: silence, the Cold War that always forced me to bend first. Divorce in our world was never simple. It could be a drawn-out legal battle with multiple hearings or years of separation before the courts allowed release. I had steeled myself for either path. but I wanted at least one final conversation, one chance to end the farce quickly. The restaurant chosen was a small weathered place near our old campus. When I arrived, I ran straight into Selene walking out. The hallway was narrow, hardly the place for confrontation, yet she positioned herself right in my path. She lit a cigarette with studied indifference and murmured, "So you're making a scene to force his hand? You don't need to play this game to make him choose, no matter what, Aurora. You will always be the one who loses. 7 years and you still haven't realized your place." My mouth opened ready to hurl the truth in her face, but then her expression shifted like lightning. The defiance in her eyes melted into an almost pitiful look. She clutched my hand with feigned fragility, her voice trembling. "Mrs. Lancaster, you've misunderstood. There's nothing between your husband and me anymore. What happened years ago is long gone. I never imagined you would still hold on to it. I only returned to visit family and old friends. If you want me to leave, I will. But please not tonight. Just let me have this one dinner for my dignity. Just one dinner." That was all she claimed she wanted. I didn't even have time to respond to her rapid transformation when suddenly a hard shove from behind slammed me against the greasy wall. I turned and saw Damian Lancaster, his jaw-tight veins throbbing in his temple. Without thinking, my hand lashed out. Once, twice, the crack of my palm echoed in the hallway. I pointed at Selene, my voice cutting like glass. "If you provoke me, hitting you would be a crime. But everything between you and me starts with this man. From now on, every time you cross me, I'll strike him instead. Let's see how many slaps that face of his can take." I pulled the divorce papers from my purse and flung them into Damian's face. "I came here to end this marriage. Stop pretending you don't understand." Then I walked downstairs, found the restaurant owner, and paid $500 for a copy of the stairwell security footage. Without hesitation, I sent the video directly into the Lancaster family group chat. Let them see the reality for themselves. I didn't care about the storm it would stir in their house, nor did I care to beg those judgmental relatives to take my side. All I cared about was packing my things and leaving the home Damian and I had shared. To me, marriage and divorce were never games. Once you decide, you do it cleanly, like slicing through a tangled knot. To drag it out to hesitate only made you look weak, as if you were playing the pathetic game of loosening the rope so it might bind tighter. I wanted no part of that. The apartment I returned to, a modest 3-bedroom left to me by the woman who raised me, was my secret sanctuary, my true home. There was a time when every corner of that house held fragments of tenderness between Damian and me. I could still remember how he once wrapped me in his arms and whispered that forever was too far away, that loving each other for a lifetime was enough. He said he loved me, and for so long I believed him. Yet now the word forever had become a bitter joke, no different from the hollow vows that held together so many fragile marriages. It was all just another performance destined to collapse. After an exhausting day of packing and moving, I sank onto the sofa of my new apartment. But instead of rest, I searched for Selene Montgomery. Once she and I had been classmates, both studying jewelry design. But during the 7 years I spent away from Damian, she had reshaped herself. She had turned toward the stage, starting in small theaters in London, clawing her way up step by step, until she held some fragile recognition in the world of drama. Now she was more than an actress. She was a digital personality, a creator with 1 million followers, her career carefully cultivated under the guidance of a media management company. 3 days from now, she would host her first live stream shopping event, and every post she uploaded seemed engineered to build momentum for it. What Selene did not know was that I had a habit of recording everything. I opened my notes, and cloud storage pulled up a clean presentation template, and began arranging in perfect chronological order every trace of contact between her and Damian since the day he married me. I documented it all with meticulous detail, every receipt, every itinerary, every photograph. 4 years of round-trip tickets between this city and London month after month. The twin ski set they purchased together. The birthday gifts he prepared for her year after year, each perfectly tailored to her age. When placed side by side, the evidence wove a flawless tapestry of devotion. To anyone who looked, it would seem undeniable, the portrait of a couple bound by enduring love. So when Selene's live stream began, I pressed publish. Within minutes, Damian Lancaster and Selene Montgomery shot to the top of trending searches, their names linked by one devastating word affair. A blazing red explosion icon burned beside the headline. The stream Selene had built her hopes upon ended in ruin, and as I predicted, my phone erupted with calls. Chief among them was Damian's mother, Eleanor Lancaster. Even through the screen, her voice was shrill and piercing enough to make my head ache. Normally, I could barely tolerate her, and that day I had no reason to endure. I drew a long breath, then snapped into the phone. "You old woman, I've given you more respect than you deserve." And with that, I ended the call and blocked her number without a second thought. Eleanor had never liked me. I had only been chosen because of all the women suitable for Damian. I was the only viable alternative to Selene. My first real fight with Damian had been because of her. We had barely been married when she began her unannounced invasions, barging into our newlywed home, at all hours criticizing me relentlessly. I endured it again and again because I loved him, until the day she looked me straight in the eyes and said coldly, "His ex-girlfriend pleased me more." That day she discovered who I truly was. I snapped, my fury exploding as I screamed at her, hurling my body against hers, pushing, striking, driving her out of the sanctuary of my home. From that moment on, I never attended another family gathering, never cared if whispers circled her, never bothered to defend her when others mocked her. That night, my mood crashed so low, I crawled under the blanket, burying my head, praying for sleep. When Damian returned from work, he stood at the edge of the bed for a long time watching. Finally, his voice came low and heavy. "Aurora, why did you have to fight with my mother again?" I stayed silent. He grew agitated, ripped the blanket away, his tone sharp, part warning, part weary surrender. "Aurora, she is my mother." I grabbed the nearest object and hurled it at him. "So what? Because she's your mother, I am expected to endure her insults, to swallow it when she deliberately brings up Selene in front of me." My voice trembled with rage. Later, when my fury cooled, I wondered if it would have been easier to simply apologize. Perhaps that was all it would have taken. So I told myself I would do it. I would swallow my pride and apologize. The next morning, still in my pajamas with my hair a tangled mess, I jumped into the car and drove straight to the Lancaster estate. A fruit knife was clenched tightly in my hand. I grabbed Eleanor Lancaster by the collar, dragged her into the passenger seat, and floored the gas, racing toward the airport highway. As I changed lanes, my voice came out icy sharp enough to cut glass. "Regretting things now, aren't you fine? I'll buy you a ticket. You can fly to London, fetch Selene Montgomery, and trade places with me. How does that sound?" In the passenger seat, Eleanor clung to the handle above the door, trembling. She tried to steady her voice, but the quiver betrayed her. "I'm sorry, I was wrong. If I hadn't stopped, I might have dragged her all the way to the departure gates." After that day, my reputation in the Lancaster family collapsed completely. They called me petty, vindictive, incapable of letting go, but I didn't care. The only thing I knew was this: I would never again live a life where others could trample me and still sleep well at night. Damian called me not long after, probably to check on his mother. From the moment I heard his voice, I could feel his exhaustion bleeding through the line. We stayed silent for a long while, neither willing to speak first. At last he exhaled slowly, his breath carrying a weary resignation. Then came the gentle, familiar tone, soft as silk, laced with entitlement. "Aurora, don't make a scene anymore." The way he said my name, so tender, so indulgent, made me realize something with painful clarity. Damian Lancaster had never respected me. Not before, not now. To him, my threats of divorce, my actions, my fury, none of it was real. He thought it was all a desperate ploy to hold on to a marriage already slipping away. I had loved too openly, too fiercely, so he felt safe in the illusion that I would never let him go. I was quiet for a long time, then finally spoke. "You must feel so triumphant. You have your youthful flame at your side, and a legal wife at home, still clinging to a marriage that only benefits you. One woman on this side of the ocean, another on the other side calling you her home. Damian, don't you think it's filthy? Don't you think it's beneath you?" Perhaps I had cut too deep because his voice returned, edged with sarcasm, weary but mocking. "Aurora, you'll always hold the title of Mrs. Lancaster. No matter what happens, I'll always come back to you. So stop hounding Selene. Do you have any idea how much trouble you've caused her? How insane you're driving both of us?" I laughed coldly. "And how is that my problem? Your classmates snicker. The internet spits venom. Aren't those consequences you and she created yourselves? I'm done pretending to be the woman who stands quietly by while you flaunt your affection for her. From now on, I'll drag her down from the pedestal you built. She won't earn a single penny off your name. That was the beginning of a war between Damian and me, a silent, endless Cold War. Meanwhile, he seemed determined to provoke me further, parading with Selene, as if they were the perfect couple, radiant enough to blind me. Some of our so-called mutual friends tried to defend them, pleading with me. It's nothing between them anymore. That breakup years ago was brutal, they just never healed from it. Selene's years abroad left her with nothing. Her first marriage ended with a child and no husband. Now she just wants to make a living streaming to support her kid. And you, Aurora, you should be proud. Damian's a rare man. Don't make it harder for everyone. I cut ties with them immediately. And to the one who dared to lecture me, I left a final warning. If you really want to play mediator, then tell Damian to sign the divorce papers and end this cleanly. And one day I hope your husband finds his own Selene Montgomery. Let's see if you'll still be this understanding. The silence that followed was broken by their outrage, their words sharp, unrestrained. But I no longer cared. As the new year approached, the Lancaster family began dusting off their suffocating traditions, dressing them up as celebrations. I had no intention of attending their hollow family banquet with Damian, but when Charles Lancaster Sr. himself called me, I clenched my teeth and agreed. Charles was the only one in that family I respected. On the day Damian and I were married, everything had been a disaster, so shameful. My own parents practically sold me off, so humiliating, the Lancaster clan whispered behind their hands. Everyone left before the vows were done, everyone except Charles. He hummed the wedding march softly under his breath, clapped with a smile, and gave us his blessing as if his approval alone could hold the ceremony together. Unluckily, Damian's car and mine pulled into the estate gates at the same time. Sitting in his passenger seat was Selene Montgomery. They both wore the look of people too proud to hide their contempt, except Selene added an extra layer of smugness. Damian leaned down, whispering something into her ear as his hand hovered protectively at her back. If this scene were a painting, I was the blot of ink ruining its composition, but I have never been someone who stands by quietly. I stormed forward, grabbed Selene by the hair, and yanked her back. The Lancasters really have fallen this far, letting strays wander through the front door. She collapsed against Damian's chest, tears glimmering in her eyes, though her lips curled in a sly smile. Damian's face darkened as he grabbed my wrist, his voice thunderous. "What are you doing?" "My mother invited her. Tonight is important." I met his fury with ice. "So what, even if your ancestors themselves invited her, I'd still drag her out." Inside, Damian glued himself to Selene's side, guarding her every step as if I were the threat. The relatives gathered in the grand salon stared at me with cold, unfamiliar eyes, whispering among themselves, but never stepping forward. The chandeliers glistened overhead. The marble floors gleamed, yet the entire house reeked of decay to me. The rot of a dynasty, hollowed out by secrets and betrayals. Eleanor Lancaster sat surrounded by her sisters-in-law, her eyes avoiding me until Damian walked in. Then her spine straightened, her voice sharpened, her judgment fell, starting a scene before even stepping into the house. Truly uneducated, I laughed bitterly. "That's rich coming from you." "Damian says Selene's here because of you. Tell me, are you trying to emulate your husband? Invite both wife and mistress to celebrate New Year's under one roof." Gasps filled the room. Everyone knew the story of Damian's father bringing both his wife and mistresses home for New Year's, once forcing them all to share the same table. It had been grotesque enough to send Eleanor into months of illness. My words were a blade reopening that wound, and the silence was suffocating. Eleanor's fingers moved slowly over the beads of her rosary, her voice calm but cutting. "Don't be so petty. You must learn to look beyond the bedroom politics of your marriage. There are larger things at play. Selene is here tonight because there's business to discuss. After you sabotaged her live stream, I decided to have Damian hand over the IILAI brand endorsement to her to make amends." Then, feigning kindness, she tilted her head at me. "Aurora, you're not still upset, are you?" My chest tightened so violently it felt as though my ribs might crack. My hand clenched around the neck of the wine bottle on the coffee table, my vision blurring with anger and despair, until all I could see was Damian across the room. My voice cut through the silence, sharp and merciless. Whose brilliant idea was this? Damian stood as if to come toward me, but Selene's hand tugged at his sleeve and he froze. Eleanor's tone remained maddeningly composed. "Have some compassion. She's a single mother raising a child alone. Life is expensive. Why cut off her livelihood? Why be so cruel? I turned my gaze back to Damian, pinning him with a look so sharp it could slice him in two. Was it you? Damian's voice was calm but resolute. Aurora, can't you understand? I agreed to this. The words landed like a final blow. Before I could stop myself, I hurled the wine bottle in my hand at him. Glass shattered against the marble floor, spraying crimson liquid across his suit. Gasps erupted around the room. No one could tell whether the red blooming across his chest was wine or blood. The hatred inside me detonated. Everyone here knew what Eelry meant. A small jewelry line under the Lancaster Empire. Yes, but its name carried weight. In Italian, Eelry translated to from past to future, a symbol of endless love of devotion. That never ends, a brand Damian had given to me on our wedding day as a private vow. It was supposed to be ours, his gift to me, a reminder of a promise eternal. Now that sacred emblem was being handed over to Selene, turned into a weapon by his mother to humiliate me. Divorce quietly with dignity. Never again. I steadied myself, wiping my damp palms against my gown, forcing my breath to even out. Charles was still waiting for me upstairs, and I needed my composure intact. I walked forward gently, placing my hand on Eleanor Lancaster's shoulder, adjusting the shawl that had slipped askew. My tone was soft, almost tender. Mother, I don't raise my hand against elders. It wouldn't be respectful. But you do love to test my patience. So what am I to do? I'll strike your son instead. I told Selene this once before, and I'll repeat it now. To hurt you or her would be a crime. But to punish him, that is a family matter. I hope you remember this so I won't have to keep reminding you. Because repeating myself is exhausting. I felt her body stiffen under my touch. Relatives burst into scandalized protests, accusing me of being insolent, of being reckless. One of the daughters-in-law, a recent bride from Hong Kong, sneered in broken English. This girl, too strong, too stupid. Men, they are cheap. Use them, don't love them. To love is foolish. Her words sliced into me. Once before I had resolved to leave Damian, I had thought, just like her, that maybe if I simply bore him a child, Charles would be happy. Eleanor would be appeased, and perhaps things might improve. But in that instant, my mind flashed back to the marriage certificate still lying untouched on my vanity table, the one thing we had, because Damian had been too busy for a honeymoon, too pressed to even take wedding portraits. He had held me that night, whispering apology after apology, his sincerity etched into my memory so deeply that it made this betrayal unbearable. When I finally climbed to Charles's room, his health was already waning, the winter having weakened him. The servants had told him everything. He looked at me, his eyes glowing with quiet pride. Good. You know how to protect yourself. He handed me an envelope thick with money, a case of heirloom jewels, and deeds to properties under his name. I stared, taken aback. Grandfather, are you truly giving these to me willingly? I'm going to divorce Damian. If you come back for them, I won't return a thing. He laughed, the sound deep but frail tears glistening in his aged eyes. These have nothing to do with him. They are mine to give. I know he wronged you, and I know of all my daughters-in-law you treated me with the most kindness. You and he had fate but no destiny. That is life's cruelty. I remember clearly the day you were to marry. His eyes shone brighter than I had ever seen, just like when he was a boy. He blushed and told me he had finally married the woman he loved most. But Aurora, I am old. I cannot control him anymore. All I can do is bless you with what I have left, and hope your path forward is brighter. All the insults from Eleanor, all the provocations from Selene I had endured without a flicker. But Charles's gentleness unraveled me. Tears streamed uncontrollably down my face as I sobbed, my voice breaking. Why did we become this? Why did love rot into ruin? He patted my head softly, his voice firm yet tender. He is not the right man. Don't waste tears on him. And he was right. I would never cry for Damian Lancaster again. When New Year's Eve arrived, the announcement came. At the stroke of midnight, as the city erupted in fireworks and cheers, every LED billboard lit up with Selene Montgomery's face. The world celebrated, and I watched as the brand that once symbolized my love became her crown. Did the wife really lose? Someone asked online, their tone dripping with mockery. Using a secondary account, I typed only 2 words, still fighting. Those 2 words shot to the very top of the trending searches within minutes. Crowds swarmed the official brand page to comment. Some sneered, but others couldn't help confessing admiration. She's impossible to hate. She knows how to sell. If I had her grit, I could do anything. Their words were like sparks catching on dry leaves spreading in waves. After Selene Montgomery's appointment as the new face of IILA, the company wasted no time launching live stream campaigns, targeting everyone from high school students to office workers. Once upon a time, the love story between Damian Lancaster and me had been the brand's most powerful advertising campaign. Under my management, I had gone beyond commerce, establishing a women's empowerment fund, dedicating part of our profits to help women of all ages overcome hardship. Now those very women raised their voices for me, flooding live streams with comments rejecting Selene as ambassador. But was it the company's PR strategy, or was it Selene herself? On live broadcasts, she feigned stumbling across the harshest comments. Her eyes shimmered with tears, her voice breaking just when viewership peaked. It's not always the first to speak who tells the truth. I admit, once I loved Damian Lancaster deeply. We were young then in love, and we planned to marry right after graduation, even dreamed of taking wedding portraits in Iceland. But in the end, the woman who became Mrs. Lancaster was someone else, someone who once called me her sister, begged to be my bridesmaid. I can't keep living under these accusations. Her timing was perfect. With a trembling smile, she ended her little speech, and almost instantly the tide of public opinion shifted. I reached for my proof, the photos with Damian, time-stamped and undeniable. But when I logged into our shared cloud storage, it was empty, every single photo erased. The one who had deleted them could only be Damian himself, the man I once trusted to share everything with me. For Selene, he had pushed me into a storm of online abuse. My name was dragged through every forum, every social feed. Self-proclaimed vigilantes found my old apartment, splattering the door with red paint, blasting vulgar insults through speakers until the walls shook. Some even sent death threats. The day I moved into a hotel, she was waiting across the street. Selene rolled down her window, sunglasses covering her eyes, no longer the fragile woman she played in front of Damian. Her mouth curled in contempt. She lifted her middle finger at me, then sped away. The street was empty, silence pressing on me, leaving only her shadow burned into my vision. I clutched my sketchbook so tightly the pages bent, fury coursing through me until I shook. How much longer would I let her get away with this? I had already recovered every deleted message, proving Selene had lied, restored them, on the second day of the scandal. But then clarity struck me. Why should I be the one scrambling to prove innocence? She made the accusations. She should carry the burden of proof. All I needed to do was collect evidence. Wait until the chaos reached its peak, then file lawsuits against every single person who had defamed me, including Selene Montgomery herself. No hurry, the longer it spread, the heavier the legal price would be. And fate, in its strange way, led me to him in Harbor City. I had flown there hunting a ruby for a client's commission, a gift for her daughter's 18th birthday. Born in July, nothing could suit her better than a red stone, radiant and strong. I didn't expect to see Adrian Blackwell at the airport. He stood tall, shoulders, broad legs, impossibly long, draped in a wine-colored overcoat, carelessly thrown over a perfectly tailored suit. He looked older now, steadier. The wildness of youth replaced by something unshakable. My heart stuttered, remembering a boy who had once known me better than anyone, now returned as a man. It had been years since we'd last seen each other, and the distance showed. Adrian rubbed the bridge of his nose in that awkward, familiar way, a half-smile tugging at his lips. "I couldn't stop worrying about you," he admitted softly. "So I came to play tour guide. We had grown up side by side, childhood friends, almost inseparable. If you stretched it, you could even call us childhood sweethearts. But once I chose Damian Lancaster, the distance between Adrian and me widened. Damian hated how close we had been. So little by little, we stopped reaching out. Eventually, silence filled the space where laughter used to live. That night, fireworks painted Harbor City's sky in bursts of color. Adrian led me down narrow streets lined with century-old shops, pointing out stalls and tucked-away eateries as if he'd memorized the city's veins. We ended up squeezed into a small corner of a 100-year-old noodle shop pressed closer than either of us had intended. Winter's chill bit at my skin, and when the ice-cold lemon tea slid down my throat, goosebumps prickled across my arms. Neither of us spoke of our present lives. Unspoken rules held the words back. Instead, we lingered in nostalgia. "Remember the bubble tea stand in front of our high school?" I asked. "It's still there," he said, his voice warm with memory. "Different owner, same tables and chairs." My lips parted in surprise. Really? It's been years since I went back. He chuckled. The old lady who used to run it still asks about you. Every time I stop by, she wonders what happened to the girl who wore her winter coat with the collar turned up pretending to look tough. Adrian's ears flushed crimson as he slurped his noodles, embarrassed by his own words. God, it's been years. I can't believe she still remembers. I laughed. You always hated being reminded of the stupid things you did. He set his chopsticks down and leaned closer, teasing as if you were any better. Don't forget the time you scooped every goldfish out of the principal's pond, just so the vice principal's stray cats could eat. The table shook with our laughter, the years melting away. For the first time in so long, I felt free, unburdened. A week after I arrived in Harbor City, Damian's secretary called. His voice was clipped, formal, clearly relaying words Damian hadn't the courage to say himself. When will you return? It's almost New Year's. The family needs you. I didn't hesitate. Couples on the edge of divorce don't celebrate New Year's together, I told him. From now on, if he has questions, direct them to my attorney. The message reached Damian late that evening. He was sitting in Selene Montgomery's townhouse, helping her untangle the legal knots of her late husband's will. The inheritance was a sprawling, crumbling castle, more burden than treasure, its yearly upkeep enough to bankrupt most. Selene feigned confusion, leaning into Damian for help, her silk gown glimmering under the lamplight. But while she talked, his mind wandered. The moment the secretary repeated my words, he froze, papers forgotten in his hands. He looked at Selene, so polished, so familiar, and felt nothing, no warmth, no spark, only a hollow echo of what once was. And then, without warning, he was seized by the urge to see me, his wife. He began gathering his files, his movements sharper, faster. Selene's smile faltered, stiff and brittle. As he turned to leave, her delicate hand clamped around his wrist. Stay, she pleaded. Tonight I promised the child we'd call her before bed. Don't go. She wants to speak to her father. That word, father, burned. The child had been born of a night that should never have happened. Selene swore the girl was his, and no one had dared to demand a DNA test for fear of breaking her fragile heart. But the more she said our daughter, the more Damian wanted to run. Wanted to find me. He pulled free and walked away without looking back. His footsteps quickened, carrying him to his car, to the office, anywhere but Selene's gilded prison. He would bury himself in work tonight, and after that he'd go to Harbor City. As for divorce, he had never truly considered it. In his mind, Aurora Kane loved him too much to leave. She had no one else to lean on, no fortress of her own. Divorce to him was nothing more than another storm in marriage, one they would weather because she had no choice. But what he didn't know was this: the woman he thought he understood was no longer the same. It was strange how easily everything between us could slip back into place, as if all the years apart had been nothing but a pause. With a little warmth, the distance melted. Since my license was useless in Harbor City, Adrian had insisted on arranging a driver for me. Every morning and night, I sat in the backseat of cars he had chosen, his quiet care, lingering even when he wasn't there. The night of the auction, I was lucky. With hardly any effort, I won the ruby I had come for. After the papers were signed, the driver asked where I wanted to go. Without hesitation, I answered Mount Pacifica. I needed a change of air, a place where the noise of my thoughts might finally untangle. Sitting in a quiet cafe halfway up the mountain, my hands wrapped around a steaming cup of hot cocoa, I felt the sugar coat my throat, sweet and almost cloying. I hadn't even finished half when a low voice came from behind me. Adrian, it's not bad, he said, as though we had been in the middle of a conversation. His eyes told me to speak first. I asked if he was tired. He smiled at the fading sun and replied that he wasn't. But what I really wanted to ask was whether he had been tired all these years, carrying a weight I could not see. The night before I had dinner with his mother, I remembered the rush after college entrance exams, how she had taken Adrian abroad and left me behind, locked in by my parents' control. All these years later, she looked nearly the same, gentle, refined, only a few more lines at the corners of her eyes. She was a woman who treasured sentiment. To my shock, she had kept little fragments of me from the past. This, she said softly, showing me a framed certificate, is your first English award. You gave it to me when you were a child, told me it was because I had helped you study, even wrote my name across the bottom. She reached for another keepsake. And this book, Adrian's prize from the community project you both joined. He read it every night until he could recite it from memory. Her voice grew fonder as she wiped dust from the frame. His father's family was wealthy, impossibly strict. I couldn't bear it. After our divorce, I came back here alone. It wasn't until months later that I realized I was pregnant. I raised Adrian myself through sickness and poverty. It never felt hard, not really. Her eyes darkened. When Adrian's grandfather fell gravely ill, he begged me to send the boy back. I thought it would be temporary, but the old man lived on and on. He forced Adrian to stay in England. I was too poor to fight. By the time I learned anything about you again, it was from your wedding invitation. She sighed. Adrian always said he would confess his feelings to you after the exams. That chance was stolen from him. She believed I had come to Harbor City to distract myself after a divorce. She wanted to comfort me, but instead she used Adrian as her shield. If you're lonely, she teased lightly, just spend some time with him. He's never had a girlfriend, not once. Every date he's tried has ended in disaster. He's still clean. My face burned. I stammered a protest, but she leaned closer, whispering mischievously, and healthy too. Nothing to worry about. I wished the floor would open and swallow me whole. Memories crashed back, and when I turned Adrian's profile, caught the last flare of the sunset. The golden light spilled over him, and suddenly I was back in the years when we had been inseparable. Do you remember the game with blades of grass? I asked, my voice unsteady. Let's find 2 strands and play again, he smirked, shaking his head. Childish. We're adults now. You know I was always competitive, I reminded him. His laugh was low, roughened by memory. Every time I was about to win, you'd break my blade in half. How is that fun? Maybe it wasn't, I admitted softly. But everyone says I was born to win. I lowered my eyes, staring at the tips of my shoes. That's why this time I have to win the divorce. Damian cannot walk away unscathed. Adrian understood instantly. His gaze sharpened with quiet solidarity. Do you need me to recommend an attorney? No, I answered firmly. Mine is more than capable. I stood walking a few steps ahead before turning back with a faint smile. Come on, take me back to the hotel. I want to see if that new sports car of yours lives up to the rumors, Mr. Blackwell. His lips curved, but he muttered under his breath, rumors, huh? Hardly a prince with a toy. When we pulled up to the entrance, he didn't get out. He stayed behind the wheel as if reluctant to let me go. We had only waved goodbye, promising to see each other again when the elevator doors nearly closed, and suddenly Damian appeared. I had no idea how he had found me, only that his presence stole the air from the room. When the elevator reached my floor, he used sheer force to drag me out, pinning me against the emergency exit wall. In the shadows, he caged me in with his arms, his forehead pressed against mine, breathing me in like a starving, abandoned animal, desperate for scraps of warmth. Having fun, Aurora? His voice was raw, trembling with anger. Why won't you just tell me the truth? You didn't come to Harbor City for work, did you? Why did he bring you back to this hotel? Tell me, Aurora, because I swear I want to lock you away somewhere no one else can ever find you. Just you and me like it was before. I forced one hand free and slapped him twice, the sharp sound echoing in the stairwell. My voice was steady when I asked, Are you sober now? Damian straightened, rubbing the sting from his face. Within seconds, his composure returned, his cold charm slipping back like a mask. Moving houses, meeting old friends. You're enjoying yourself too much. It's time to come home. Maybe once I had been too easily swayed by his words, and he had convinced himself that no matter how great the betrayal, sweet lies would always draw me back. He grabbed my hand, pressed it against his cheek like a spoiled child. You hit harder these days, he muttered. It hurts, you know. But Aurora, everything with Selene, that's in the past. I gave her a contract so she could earn money. That's all. Stop comparing yourself to her. You're my wife. I yanked my hand away, my voice cold as glass. It isn't about comparison. What you gave her was mine. And Damian, you're smart enough to know I'm not joking. Stop pretending madness can excuse betrayal. For a moment, his gaze flickered. Then he pulled out his phone, swiping fast, before shoving the screen at me. Your flight's booked for tomorrow. You're coming home with me. Before leaving, he pressed a kiss against my forehead, as if he still had the right. I remained still, then calmly took out my own phone and dialed. Hello, I need to report an assault. Minutes later, I found myself staring at the city lights from the back of a police car. At the station, his lawyer tried to paint it as a domestic quarrel, but the hotel cameras didn't lie. The footage showed Damian forcing me out, holding me down. Adrian's attorney spoke on my behalf. When asked for my decision, I replied coolly, delay the case. keep him from returning to the mainland for now. I knew Damian's family connections would eventually pull strings to release him, but time was all I needed. Time to strike first. I booked the earliest flight back to New York. The moment I landed, I filed a public lawsuit against Selene Montgomery demanding the return of all marital assets she had colluded to take, and holding her accountable for defamation. She barely reacted at first. She kept smiling at Gallus, even daring to mention the lawsuit in interviews. "We both studied design," she said sweetly. "And what terrifies any designer the most? Being copied. Having your work stolen. Sadly, Aurora Kane has done that again and again." Her words lit a wildfire. Overnight, social media drowned in attacks against me. They called me a fraud, a thief, a disgrace, but I didn't flinch. The more they cursed, the sharper my vision became. The ruby I had purchased in Harbor City became the centerpiece of my newest creation, a blazing sun rising above the horizon, framed by petals of soft gold and diamonds, catching fire at its edges. For the first time in years, I felt truly alive in my craft. This piece was mine undeniably, and I entered it into a global design competition. What I didn't expect was for my entry itself to be turned into another weapon against me. Selene went live online demanding answers from the organizers. "Why allow a plagiarist with questionable morals to compete?" she cried. Her fans erupted, flooding the committee with complaints, emails, petitions to strip me of my eligibility. But it wasn't their noise that haunted me. It was the seed of doubt she planted. "There are serious suspicions of plagiarism." That line lingered, echoing like a curse I couldn't yet escape. Every one of my creations was like a child to me. For Selene Montgomery to publicly smear me, it wasn't just defamation, it was a brutal insult. At the same time, social media erupted, hailing her as a design prodigy. That night, during a live stream, she held up a sketch nearly identical, 80% at least, to mine. With practiced innocence, she claimed it was something she had drawn back in college, a birthday gift to herself. In front of millions of viewers, she pointed straight at me through the screen and called me a cowardly plagiarist. Within hours, my phone email, every inbox I owned, drowned in venom. Death threats, slurs, endless rage. But what truly cut deep was the message from one of my biggest clients, Aurora. "I need an explanation." What Selene and her cheerleaders hadn't expected was this: I had recorded every second of my creative process. Out of pure love for the piece, I had filmed 56 hours of footage over 3 days, every line sketched, every adjustment refined, every gemstone placed. I released it all online, unedited. And I didn't stop there. I checked the surveillance footage of my design studio and uncovered a devastating truth. On the grainy video, Eleanor Lancaster appeared outside my locked studio door, fumbling with the code. After failing several times, she pulled out her phone. The name flashing on the screen was her son, Damian Lancaster. She couldn't know that I had already changed every password, revoking Damian's access to my security system. Yet minutes later, the door opened. Someone had let her in. The betrayer was my own assistant. For $5,000, she handed Eleanor the keys. Together, they opened my safe. Eleanor photographed my original sketches in silence, then walked away as if she had left no trace. And later, those stolen designs appeared under Selene's name. I posted the footage in full. No blur, no cuts, no mercy. Within seconds, the internet exploded. Just as Damian returned from Harbor City, ready to repair his image, he was dragged headfirst into the storm. He called me, his voice vibrating with rage. "Aurora, you've gone too far. No matter what you once called her mother, doesn't this feel cruel?" I laughed, arms crossed, as I stared at the screen. Did I tell her to steal from me? Seizing the moment, I delivered my final blow, a revised divorce agreement. Damian would walk away with nothing, not a single asset. He read it in silence, then muttered the same old line. "I won't agree to divorce." He spoke like he was the victim of injustice, like surrendering me cost him more than surrendering his fortune. He tried again. "I'll stay out of Selene's mess. If you want to sue her, demand damages, whatever you want, it's yours. But on one condition, we don't divorce." Selene was right there beside him, clutching his arm, her eyes wide with panic. "No, Damian, think of the baby. It can't grow up with a mother in prison." Her hysteria rose. She grabbed a box of tissues and hurled it at me. I simply leaned aside, calm as ever. "Damian, you have no right to negotiate. Either you leave this marriage penniless, and I'll spare your mother the humiliation of prison, or she can spend the rest of her life branded a thief." Eleanor broke. She lunged at Selene, clawing, screaming, You forced me. You promised that if I helped you, Aurora would obey me. You told me." Her voice cracked, her hands shaking with fury. "You called her a whore and made me steal for you." I didn't even flinch. I placed the choice squarely in Damian's lap. His shoulders slumped, his entire body trembling, his voice hoarse. "Aurora, do you still love me?" Once at 20, I might have said yes. Back then, I believed in fairy tales and winning Damian's whole heart. But at 27, after choking on betrayal again and again, my answer was steel. "I don't love you. I love your empire. That's all that's left." The day Damian transferred every last asset into my name, our marriage ended. Officially, irreversibly. Across social media, the same voices that had cursed me now bent their knees, posting tearful apologies. I won the lawsuit. The worst offenders, the ones who fabricated lies, spread filth, incited mobs, were sentenced to 2 years in prison. The rest paid damages and published public apologies. A few tried to hide behind excuses. Poor students, ignorance, naivety. But justice didn't bend. And for the first time in years, I stood tall, untouchable. I never forgave any of them. When they cursed me, they wanted the whole world to hear. So when they apologized, the whole world would witness that too. As for Selene Montgomery and the traitor who sold me out, Selene not only had to repay every cent she stole while I was still Damian Lancaster's wife, she also had to spend her own money to buy back the very piece of jewelry she once defamed. My life is still full of inspiration, full of creations waiting to be born. But her life was already over. And the traitor, Marissa Hale, was sentenced to 6 months in prison. I even arranged for the two of them to serve time in the same block. They deserve to take care of each other. Damian's mother, Eleanor Lancaster, went to extraordinary lengths to bring Selene's child back to the States, claiming it was Damian's son. But 7 days later, the truth surfaced. The boy wasn't family at all. They said Eleanor was so furious she nearly suffocated, spent half a month in the hospital recovering. When everything finally ended, I packed my bags and decided to celebrate my freedom with a journey. At the station, I ran into Damian. He looked exhausted in his traveler's gear, standing right in front of me. "Aurora," he pleaded, "give me another chance. I want to win you back." I thought for a moment, then lifted my train ticket. Back in college, I dreamed of going to Tibet, to Lhasa, to see the landscapes from the poems, to breathe that air, to wander with no plan. I'll stay there for 7 days, no fixed path, no schedule. If fate brings us face to face again on a street in Lhasa, then maybe I'll give you that chance. That same day, Damian stood frozen as I boarded the train. Moments later, he rushed off to buy a flight to Lhasa. But I never went. Midway, I got off, changed my ticket, and boarded the first train bound for Delingha, a place I had only known from poems. 7 days. There passed slowly, freely. Life felt unburdened, and even my body seemed to relax with each breath. On the final night, as I sat by a fire during a local gathering, my phone rang. It was Damian. His voice was raw. "Aurora, I can't find you," I answered calmly. "That's right, I never went there." "Why?" he asked. "Do I need a reason?" I said flatly. "That promise, I made it on a whim. I never once thought of starting over with you, and I certainly didn't come here to stumble over trash. 7 years had already shown me what he was worth. His regret, his desperate pursuit of his ex-wife, it disgusted me. So I spoke his name clearly, firmly. Damian Lancaster. Do you know why I told you to go to Lhasa? Because I knew about your altitude sickness. I hoped you would die there. That would have been the perfect ending for both of us. Marriage to him was a stain on my record, nothing less. Whether he lived well or poorly from now on, I wanted nothing to do with it. I could accept that I misjudged him, that I was never loved, that everything I gave had no return, that some devotions are simply unreachable. But what I would not do was chain myself to a prison with no future. So that night in Delingha, I wrote a vow to myself. I've walked every crooked road. From now on, my life is nothing but straight lines.